Ask any RTS player what they want from the next big one, and you'll get the same list. A campaign you remember for years, a skirmish opponent that feels smart, competitive multiplayer that stays alive, battles you can read at a glance.
And a patch cadence that keeps it all fair for 5 years. I'd buy that game today, which is why the forums are full of "nobody makes the games I want anymore."
Everybody would. It's tiny units on a map. How demanding can it be? And games that go for the whole list are rare. Not because the genre died. It didn't. Because that wish list isn't one game. It's a product line wearing one price tag.
So start with the model people think in. I thought in it for years. An RTS is one simulation plus content. Get units moving, fighting, gathering, and campaign, skirmish, and multiplayer are, basically menus into the same finished game.
Build the engine once, stamp out modes.
And that's the assumption that breaks. The trap in that model is the definition of done. The 3 modes share units and maps. They don't share a finish line.
Meaning what, concretely? Take a unit we invent right now, an artillery crawler. Long range, slow, fragile.
Right. Campaign wants it scripted into set-piece moments where that range matters. Skirmish wants the computer to know when to build it. Multiplayer wants its cost fair in every matchup, because price it wrong and one matchup stops being playable. Same crawler, 3 definitions of finished.
So an RTS is not one hard system. It's several products forced to share one simulation.
So campaign is where that's best documented. The case is Grey Goo from Petroglyph. They'd built a sophisticated skirmish opponent, so the campaign plan was 15 unscripted missions. You, that opponent, no scripts.
Which I want to defend because it sounds like a great engineering call. The matches are already good. The system generates the content. Why hand script 15 missions when the simulation produces the drama for you?
For a long time, that was the plan. Then, roughly a year before launch, they played it straight through. Ted Morris, the executive producer, tells this in the postmortem. And it felt like the same skirmish 15 times.
Think of an improvised film, sort of. Talented actors, a clear premise. You still don't get deliberately paced scenes for free.
That's the light version, yeah. Nobody improvises a third act. Petroglyph spent 2 months just deciding, then restarted the campaign. Designers, dialogue, objectives, triggers, a whole cinematic system. By their own account, roughly double the campaign work.
And they'd say the doubling was correct?
They would. That's what stuck with me. The tech worked exactly as designed. It just turned out that good matches and a campaign are different products.
Same game, next problem. The opponent itself. Petroglyph had deliberately built a reasoning opponent that didn't cheat.
Which is the thing players say they want. Win by playing better, not by being handed the answers.
And the campaign was still too punishing anyway. Their own read is kind of humbling. The team had gotten so good at their own game that they couldn't judge what a first-time player could handle anymore. So they added controls that slow the opponent down on easier settings.
Whew. The thing they built right is what made it too hard. So smart was never one dial. Capable, sure, but also fair. Readable enough to learn from, tunable, and honestly, fun to lose to. 5 gauges, not 1.
So they weren't tuning difficulty. They were tuning how it feels to lose.
Now, maps, because my mental model has always filed maps under content, not systems. An environment artist paints something gorgeous, you drop in starting positions, done?
That's the painting. Underneath it, there's a production floor. On Grey Goo, for example, a single campaign map took roughly 4 months from paper design to final polish.
Hold on, 4 months? For one map?
On that project, yes, rich, dense environments. And a map is never just art. It's mission pacing, where the fights are allowed to happen. It's scripting surface. It's terrain the pathfinding has to survive.
Oh, and a performance case, because the ugliest battle on it still has to run. And a balance surface the moment 2 players fight on it.
Every one of those is a job someone has to finish. The same postmortem owns the trade-off. Rich campaign maps cost them multiplayer map count. And they shipped a public terrain editor, since community maps extend the pool in a way internal production can't.
1 tile on the level select screen. 6 invoices behind it.
Now put a human in front of all that. The RTS studio Relic, their animator Michael Moore has a blunt framing. If you can't assess the battle, you can't issue good orders. Readability sits upstream of strategy.
And they mean it mechanically, down to unit silhouettes and how a squad moves. The animation isn't decoration, it's the data feed.
Say you give every sniper in your game a slow, visible target line. A newcomer learns, line means my guys are about to die. A veteran reads every line on the field in half a glance and repositions. One signal, two payoffs.
So why not just simplify the whole game until newcomers can read it?
Because their designer, Daniel Kading, names the catch. A new RTS already hands you an elaborate toolkit, and if you strip out the systems the fans came for, you lose them. Which is why a team can end up building separate modes instead of one simplicity slider. The Halo Wars 2 team kept a recognizable RTS for veterans, built new modes for newcomers, and their new player mode Blitz took several false starts before they believed it worked.
So onboarding gets its own iteration bill, and somebody has to pay it out of the same budget.
So far, every cost was content. What I didn't realize reading these postmortems is that the rules don't sit still while all that content gets built.
StarCraft is the famous example from Blizzard's own retrospective. After the 1996 public showing, they overhauled the game. Technical director Bob Fitch rebuilt the engine in about 2 months, and the economy wasn't finalized until 4 months before release. Nobody recommends that method. It happened anyway.
4 months out, the economy is still moving. So let's say that happens in any RTS. The income rule changes that late. What breaks next?
Any mission balanced around the old income, the computer opponent's build timings, unit costs in multiplayer, the interface, wherever it taught the old rule.
And after those, what breaks next?
The tests. Everything validated under the old economy needs rechecking. Even recorded audio can be on the hook if missions change.
The stuff you already signed off on?
Tiberian Sun hit that wall. They locked voice recording and localization before mission design and balance were finished. So when missions got redesigned, the affordable repair left was text pop-ups. Doing it properly would have cost at least another month.
Oh man, that one hurt to read. A text box as the fix for a redesigned mission? So features started getting cut for survival, not design.
Both, really. The same team cut a dynamic battlefield after pathfinding trouble and watched mission triggers grow into an event set they call overwhelming to debug. Their advice afterward? Fewer features, built more fully. Because rules, tools, and content move together, and every feature has to move with all three.
But this isn't only a big studio problem. The same multiplier lands on a team a fraction of the size. And down there, you can watch the refusals happen in public. Take Empires of the Undergrowth, the Ant Colony RTS. Early on, that team threw away more than a year of work on their own custom engine.
Abandoning your own engine after sinking a year into it? That's a brutal call to make out loud.
Out loud on a crowdfunding page. Their second plan dropped whole promises, separate campaigns, multiplayer, the full level editor. What survived entered early access in 2017 and reached version 1.0 in 2024.
That's 6+ years of early access, though. Not a quiet waiting room.
No, it's practically a second product, keeping that audience informed, heard, and fed between the big campaign tiers. And late on, the story mode took priority. By their own read, multiplayer was probably never going to be justified for that project.
So what did all that refusing actually buy them?
The finish line. Look, the old me reads that cut list and sees an unfinished RTS. It's backwards. Those refusals are disciplined survival. The narrower game shipped, and the impossible one wouldn't have.
So take the opening grievance back out. Nobody makes the games I want anymore. These sources don't show a death certificate. They're the teams themselves in postmortems and interviews, links in the description. They show the same response over and over. Pick which promise owns the game. Campaign first, multiplayer first, a streamlined mode, a staged release, community tools.
So the full package RTS didn't die so much as the package split. Teams stopped promising every pillar at equal depth because the promise itself is the risky part.
With one correction, and it matters. A missing mode tells you where the team chose to focus. It doesn't tell you where every dollar went. An omission buys room. It isn't a receipt.
Yeah, that distinction does a lot of work. So the model one more time. every RTS feature becomes an engine problem, a content problem, and a testing problem. The teams that finish pick which of those bills they can pay.
Let's turn that into something you can use on the store page of the next RTS that catches your eye. 4 questions.
All right, let's hear them.
1. Which product owns this game? 2. Which feature multiplies the most work? 3. What did the team deliberately refuse? 4. Does the scope they kept reinforce the experience they're selling?
Imagine 1. A campaign-first RTS. 1 faction, no multiplayer, 12 authored missions, no editor. The owner is the campaign, clearly. The biggest multiplier they kept is those missions. That's the Grey Goo bill, scripting and pacing and 4-month maps. Deliberately refused, multiplayer, and the balance treadmill that comes with it. And the scope hangs together. Everything they kept feeds the story.
Right. And notice what the 4 questions don't do. They never tell you the campaign is good. Deliberate isn't the same as well executed. They tell you the team knew which game it was making. That's the signal.
Beats the wish list I walked in with. One rule set was never one game. An RTS is several products forced to share one simulation. Read a store page that way, and missing modes stop looking like laziness and start looking like the plan. Thanks for listening to Learning Podcasts.